That report by Ben Kitili begs many more questions. That is why we're bringing in our senior political reporter, Duncan Haemba, who is joining us live from our city center studios for more on this. But before that, remember, news we are receiving just now. President Uhuru Kenyatta has fired Rashid Echesa, as the sports cabinet secretary, and in his place appointed former education cabinet secretary Amina Mohammed to his place. Former University of Nairobi Vice Chancellor as well as Chairman of the Kenya National Examinations Council, Professor George Magoha, has been nominated to be the new Education Cabinet Secretary. It is a new cabinet reshuffle announced by President Uhuru Kenyatta, which has seen reshuffles also in the state departments. But Duncan Haemba will put this into perspective. Duncan, let's begin there with the sacking of Rashid Echesa. I mean, many would say they saw this coming. He made many negative headlines, from corruption to questions over his academic qualifications. There was allegations of human trafficking, his recent spat with ODM leader Raila Odinga. What more do you have on that?
Michelle, yes, many would say that they saw it coming. Maybe some would say it was just a matter of time before this happened. But of course, there are those that are saying whatever has been dispatched this morning from the House on the Hill, some would say it's a soft cabinet reshuffle or a soft reorganization of cabinet, because of course we know that for the past few days or few weeks, the media has been awash with all manner of allegations of scam in government, and we've seen big names making headlines that have been under probe, and therefore many would have thought that this would have come as an earth-shaking reshuffle, so to speak. But of course, with the firing of only one member of cabinet and then one principal secretary, and then many would term it as a soft reshuffle or reorganization. Back to your question on why many had said it was just a matter of time, what we can add on to that speculation or that rumor mill, if you may want to call it, is reports that and then until this morning, Sports CA's admission that one of the men who were accused, who were arraigned for impersonating President Uhuru Kenyatta and conning a business, a tycoon in this capital, is the fact that there are reports that Echesa had admitted that he knows that person by the name Joseph Waswa as a personal friend. Now, it's one of the dailies that has carried that story, and we know, of course, the fury and the uproar and the shock that that aspect or that haste, if you might call it, that people impersonated the president, even had his cell phone number and called a business tycoon and managed to swindle them millions of shillings. The fact perhaps that if it's true that Echesa admitted that he knows Waswa as a personal friend, then maybe that might be the stroke that has broken the colonel's back. And therefore, that might just add to a litany of blunders that many have been saying. It was just a matter of time before an axe landed on the man from Mumias, Rashid Echesa Mohammed. Therefore, as it stands, maybe that is what you could say. Maybe that is the reason why only one member of cabinet has been shown the door, finally. And many were asking, when will the president ever act, crack the whip, fire? Then we've seen it happen. Remember in 2015 when we had a similar situation in terms of allegations, then 6 cabinet secretaries that finally decided to throw in the towel. They were said to have been to have resigned. Of course, that is Charity Ngilu, Kambi Kazungu, Davis Chirchir, Kamau, Engineer Michael Kamau, Felix Koske, and then Anne Waiguru. All of them, they are said to have resigned. But this one, the communication has been very explicit. Vacation, firing, if you want it. Michelle.
Are we likely to see more of this? Because the corruption scandals now have not grown only in intensity. They keep moving higher in the hierarchy. Several cabinet secretaries are now being implicated in corruption scandals. Several of them in the recent 2 weeks alone have been questioned by anti-corruption bodies over loss of millions. Are we likely to see more of what's happened this morning?
Yes, I believe there are telltale signs. The writing is on the wall that heads will roll, and the big heads for that matter. Yesterday, the president in Muranga, he spoke, and you could see the anger. He was seething with anger, the fury in his eyes. And when he spoke in his native Kikuyu language and said, you are going to see arrests and big people are going, no matter the noise that you make over microphones. Of course, he was talking about politicians that are ranting about whether it's witch hunt or it's a true fight against corruption. You could see the president's fury in his eyes. You could feel him seething with anger and said, it will happen. And then casualty number one has happened. Why we are saying the writing is on the wall is because of the allegations of corruption in government that are flying left, right, and center. When we know that for the past few weeks, we know the number of CSs that have been grilled by detectives, either from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission or Directorate of Criminal Investigations. Of course, today, the Standard says National Treasury CS Henry Rotich has been given a second date to go back to DCI and clarify a few issues again. Of course, we know that last week he was grilled by the same detectives. We know that Tourism and Wildlife CS Najib Balala has been grilled by detectives from EACC. And then there are talks of Water CS Simon Chelugui. The list is a bit long, and therefore, if there will be recommendations from DCI to the DPP, then it is a foregone conclusion that maybe next week or in 2 weeks' time, but maybe under a month, definitely more heads are going to roll, and therefore the real reorganization in cabinet might finally be taking place if what has been going on between DCI and EACC as far as corruption allegations goes, then more reshuffle or more reorganization of the cabinet.
All right, Haim, but do stay with me on this one. We want to get reactions from Kakamega, but when I come back, I mean, we'll be speaking about, like you mentioned, the president pulled a similar move in 2015, but you noticed that the lot of fired ministers then has since been reappointed to other ministerial positions or ambassadorial positions. So really, what is the end game there? But let's listen in. Our reporter, Willie Lusige, already getting reactions of Kenyans from Kakamega. Lusige, what do Kenyans have to say over this cabinet reshuffle?
Michelle, it has come as a shock, especially to the people of Western Region, because Rashid Echesa, who was the cabinet secretary for the Ministry of Sports, was the only one from Western Region, apart from Eugene Wamalwa, who hailed from Trans Nzoia County. So most of the people are a little bit shocked. They felt that maybe even if a cabinet reshuffle was to take place, maybe another leader from Western Region could have been given a position so as to have that equality. But most of them are not really able to accept that the only cabinet secretary from Western Region, who is Rashid Echesa, has been fired, and they still felt that maybe he had an opportunity to continue serving as a cabinet secretary for the whole country and also represent the people of Western Region. But apart from that, also there have been a lot of issues in regard to maybe the performance of the whole cabinet, and there was a lot of expectation that President Uhuru Kenyatta will have a cabinet reshuffle, but no one thought maybe some of the leaders from this region could have been affected in regard to that reshuffle, and maybe they expected maybe it could be only transfer from one cabinet position to the other one, but they never expected that Rashid Echesa, who hails from Kakamega County, to be specific, from Mumias, and who has been playing a key role in terms of sports, could have been fired. But now I can briefly explain that the reactions are mixed. Some of them feel that this cabinet reshuffle has come at the right time, because also President Uhuru Kenyatta wants to leave a legacy, and also he needed a performing cabinet. But so far, most of them really feel that it's the right time, but they do not agree most in regard to the exchange of positions and also the firing of the cabinet secretary for sport. But a few of the individuals that I've spoken to here within Kakamega town, they have felt that maybe for the other positions, like the one for Amina Mohammed, where we have seen him being transferred from education to sports, they feel that maybe she was not able to handle well the education bucket, and they feel now that we have the former Vice Chancellor of Nairobi University, Professor George Magoha, and also the chair of NEC will handle that position of education more better, and maybe he will deliver. And they feel that for him, that is the best position that he could have handled. But for the others, they have mixed reaction, especially that they feel a lot and they have a lot of emotions in regard to the firing of the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Sports, who is Rashid Echesa. And as I have noted earlier, he hails from here in Kakamega County, in Mumias, and they felt that is the only position that the government had, especially the Jubilee government, had given the people of Western Region as a gift or as a thank you for the votes that they garnered here during the 2017 election. So we'll keep on following up on the reaction of the people from Western Region and maybe update our viewers as time goes on.
All right, but listen, even as we speak about political gifts and political rewards, there have been quite a lot of events, and negative headlines and negative publicity regarding, the former Cabinet Secretary Rashid Echesa leading up to this sacking today. What do residents of Kakamega have to say about that?
We all have to remember that before Rashid Echesa became the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Sports, he's also a politician. So there is a number of people who support him, and there is a number of people who also oppose him. And from what we have already noted, that we have had a lot of scandals being linked to him. But from his own side, he has always stand still that maybe those were his political rivals trying to push him down and throw him under the bus. But so far, we still feel that some of those scandals have not yet been proven, and we cannot judge him. But there's a lot of reactions. Even some locals here have always been pushing for and calling President Uhuru Kenyatta maybe to take action for the CS after what we have been experienced before. We have seen a lot of issues between him and Kakamega Senator Cleophas Malala, and during some of the happenings, some of the leaders even from Western Region went ahead and had a press conference calling for President Uhuru Kenyatta to take action. But so far we can say the reaction is still mixed, and even the perception about maybe his scandals and what has happened previously, people are still divided on their opinions.
All right, so many thanks. Willie Lusiga there giving us reactions from Kakamega following that cabinet reshuffle by President Uhuru Kenyatta this morning. Rashid Echesa has been sacked as a Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Sports. Duncan Haemba is still live for us from our city center studios. Duncan, let's discuss the Ministry of Education. Former Education CS Ambassador Amina Mohammed now moving to the Ministry of Sports, and NEC Chairman Professor George Magoha being nominated to take her space in the Ministry of Education. Some would say he deserved this position, considering that when he worked very closely with then Education CS Fred Matiang'i, there was 0 cases of cheating in the national examinations.
Yes, I think for Professor George Magoha, now it is, we would say, that a fish that is now properly in water, because he's been there, and as you've said, they worked hand in glove with then CS Fred Matiang'i when they carried out radical surgery in the education sector. Remember when the NEC was disbanded and he took charge, that is when they started implementing a raft of radical changes that brought about a new dawn in the education sector. And then some would say perhaps he's been playing from the midfield. Now he's moved to the center forward, if you understand the language of football. So Professor George Magoha is like he has now moved from the midfield or the flanks, and now he's at the center forward at the ministry. And therefore, we do expect, this is not a stranger in the education sector. Of course, he was a vice chancellor for some of us who went across the road at the Nairobi University. He's from there, now he became the NEC chair, and he's remained there. Now he's the CS Education. Therefore, this is a person whose alpha and omega is education. He's a person who knows his trade too well. He's a workaholic, like the man they worked together with, that is Fred Matiang'i, whom, by the way, they were also lecturers at the Nairobi University at some point. And therefore, this is a person whom you'd say he's at home and he will have sleepless nights as far as running the ministry is concerned. That is if he continues with the necessary support that they've been having or that they've been according to his predecessors, that is Fred Matiang'i, Amina Mohamed. And therefore, there are some that were saying that perhaps for CS Amina, the education docket was a bit dragging her, given that she was a high-flying CS in terms of how she performed while at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And by taking over the Ministry of Education, some were saying a bit things were not moving swiftly basing on her performance record compared to how she fared on at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay. And therefore, for George Magoha now to move from the seat of NEC chair to the CS now at the center of the Ministry of Education, this is a person who is home and dry. He knows very well the blueprint that they had when they started implementing the radical changes in the Ministry of Education. Right. And therefore, it will be an easy ride for him if he'll get the support that they've been extending to his predecessors, as I've said earlier.
All right, Haimba. Do stay with us, Haimba. I still have so much more to engage you on. But let's take a look at the Ministry of Sports, or the sports docket, then bring in, by way of phone, Robin Toskin, who is the sports editor with the Standard. Toskin, good morning. Quite big news for the sports lovers and Ministry of Sports this morning. What do you make of the sacking of Rashid Echesa and the now new Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Sports, Ambassador Amina Mohamed?
Good morning, Michelle, and I must say I've really been taken back by the breaking news because two appointments there, or two appointments where Professor Magoha has been taken to the Ministry of Education, and everyone else is saying really that was a spot-on selection because of Magoha's performance and his long career in the world of academia. But for Amina Mohamed, I tell you what, I've just received so many calls. I'm unable even to answer some, and people are really expressing their shock at the appointment of Amina, or being moved to the Ministry of Sports. And they are saying, look, why is it that anytime there's this kind of reshuffle, the sports docket appears to be like a dumping ground for people who have no clue with what sport is? Maybe it's an early judgment of what she's capable of doing, but we've seen how she has performed well at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but he's had problems in the Ministry of Education. But now she's moving to sports, and everyone is really up in arms and saying, look, the president could have done better. But of course, they are saying congratulations, because you have seen the light and moved Rashid Echesa out of the sports docket, right, because apparently so many people have had issues with Echesa.
And let's talk more about him. I mean, how would you rate his performance in the Ministry of Sports during his tenure?
I think I would give him a C- if I was to grade him according to those rankings, because really there's nothing much he has done. Of course, he came in there at the height of so many politics behind the scenes within the Ministry of Sports. But because of his lack of knowledge in the politics of sport, it has been really difficult for him to maneuver. And one of the things that we expected him to really dissect and come up with a clear path was the National Sports Fund, which, according to the Constitution or the Act of 2013, it derives its funding from the sports lottery funds. But then the way it has been handled, it appeared that he was not, in the picture. He didn't have the grasp of what was going on when the Sports Act was discussed in Parliament and subsequently taken to the Treasury. And everyone was saying, look, he needed to have stepped up and showed some leadership, but then it was taken over by his juniors within the sports ministry.
All right, many thanks. That is Robin Toskin there. He is our sports editor with the Standard. Let's get back to our senior political reporter, Duncan Hemba, live from our city center studios. And Hemba, even as this reshuffle comes, many Kenyans expecting that more action will be taken against especially cabinet secretaries and those in government implicated in corruption scandals. The president has made a similar move before in 2015, but now some of those who were fired then have already, been reappointed in several cabinet positions. How then are we to gauge the seriousness of the president's move?
Michelle, I could not hear you clearly. The line had some interruptions, but I've heard you towards the end. But in terms of how serious this move is to be taken, one, in 2015, what was communicated was the president's admission that he has accepted the resignation of the then CSs. This is the first time that we are getting that communication of vacation from office. So clearly, this one is an outright or automatic sacking or firing. In 2015, of course, we could see the likes of Anne Mombi Waiguru saying that they have asked the president to give them light duties. They are getting out of office. We could get statements, the president saying he has received resignation letters from Charity Ngilu, Kambi Kazungu, Michael Kamau, Felix Koskei, Davis Chirchir. But this is the one that now there's that explicit communication, vacation from office. Clearly, it's the direct sacking. And as I've mentioned, the People Daily has a report that yesterday the CS, until this morning, sports CS Rashid Echesa Mohammed admitted to be a personal friend to one Joseph Waswa, who has been arraigned for impersonating the president and together with another gang getting away or managing to swindle millions of shillings from a businessman in the capital. That is a very serious allegation. And of course, there have been reports on social media that some money, those are claims that were recovered from some house. There are people who are throwing words around that house belongs to a cabinet secretary, and we are not sure how that is.
Let's move away from that, Hemba. Even as those allegations go on, we'll be discussing those later. But I understand that today, moving away from that, embattled a member of parliament, Aisha Juma, as well as Hamsambweni counterpart, Suleima Dori, is set to know their fate as the ODM's National Governing Council meets today. What are we to expect from that meeting?
Well, it is basically whether the National Governing Council will ratify what the ODM Disciplinary Committee endorsed and what was upheld by the ODM's National Executive Council. And therefore, some would say this could as well mark their eviction from the party or their eviction from ODM, but in itself it's not the end, because if that happens, the National Governing Council brings together all elected governors, all elected senators, members of the National Assembly, branch chairmen. It's a team. According to the letter that we've seen, it's an invitation of 10 organs within the party. And therefore, if they will have to ratify that, then now what will remain to be seen is if the two besieged members of parliament will have to fight to save their seat, or they will be brave enough and pull what Raila Odinga pulled many years back when he resigned from Ford Kenya, then went to a by-election and recaptured his Langata parliamentary seat under the National Development Party, NDP. So if they will feel that they have what it takes, they might decide that they are not going to appeal, because remember, after the National Governing Council ratifies the eviction, then it means the party will have to write to the Registrar of Political Parties indicating that it has severed links with the two individuals that they've ceased to be the party's members. Remember, the net effect of this will be they are in parliament on the account that they are members of ODM, and therefore if ODM says they are no longer its members, then it means they cannot represent the party in the National Assembly. So if they feel that they are well prepared, they have their clout on the ground in terms of challenging the ODM party, then they will proceed, because they will just await, after the Register of Political Parties writes to the Speaker of the National Assembly that the following members have been struck off from the membership of ODM, and as such they are strangers in the House. Then it will be, of course, the Speaker now declaring them strangers in the House, and they will have lost their seats. And therefore, the Register of Political Parties will only communicate to IEBC as well as the Speaker of the National Assembly, and then that will seal their fate. However, if they feel that they were not given a fair hearing, and the NGC has upheld what they will call an unfair hearing, then they'll have the option of appealing the same, either through the court process, or they can decide to go and bite the bullet, that is, subject themselves before their supporters or their constituents, then be ready for a by-election. So it is a very heavy day for them as well, because you know what this means.
Many thanks. That is Duncan Haemba, there, our senior political reporter, live for us from our city centre studios. Now, the Council of Governors, in collaboration with the Senate as well as other stakeholders, is scheduled to hold its 6th annual